The face staring back at me from the bathroom mirror seemed unfamiliar, etched with lines of grief I did not recognize. Eyes puffy and red-rimmed from tears that seemed to have no end. I leaned closer, tracing the damp path on my cheek with a trembling finger. "How?" I whispered to the reflection, the question hanging heavy in the sterile silence. "How could you say it was my fault, Jake? My fault your marriage ended." The words felt like shards of glass in my throat. All I ever did, all I ever wanted, was to help, to see you happy. But the accusation echoed relentlessly, a cruel refrain playing on repeat in my mind. Meddling, interfering, no respect for boundaries. "It's your fault, Mom." My son, my only child, the center of my world since his father passed away 15 years ago, had pronounced me the wrecking ball that demolished his life, and I didn't understand why. Before the storm broke, life felt full. Perhaps, looking back with the painful clarity of hindsight, it was too full, too centered around Jake and his wife, Emily. When Jake first brought Emily home, a bright, kind young woman with warm eyes and an easy laugh, I welcomed her with open arms. She felt like the daughter I never had. I wanted them to have the best start, the kind of loving, supportive foundation that Robert and I had shared. Was that so wrong? I helped them find their first apartment, negotiating with the landlord because Jake hated doing things like that. I'd drop off home-cooked meals frequently, knowing they were both working long hours trying to get ahead. "Just saving you the trouble, kids," I'd say, waving off their thanks. When they bought their first house, a fixer-upper, I offered perhaps too many opinions on paint colors and kitchen renovations, bringing over swatches and magazine clippings, eager to share my own experiences. I babysat their golden retriever, Cooper, whenever they went away, treating him like the grand dog I adored. I thought I was being helpful, supportive, the kind of mother and mother-in-law who eased burdens, who fostered closeness. Robert always said I had a tendency to overlove, but he meant it affectionately. Maybe Jake saw it differently. Maybe Emily did too, though she was always so polite, so gracious, accepting my casseroles and advice with a smile I now wondered might have been strained. Were there signs I missed? Little hesitations? Subtle withdrawals? I search my memory now, dissecting every interaction, every conversation, looking for clues I was blind to at the time. Did I offer financial advice too freely when Jake mentioned struggling with bills? Did I overstay my welcome during visits? Did I unconsciously take sides during their minor disagreements, always viewing things through the protective lens of Jake's mother? My heart aches with the possibility. I replay conversations, second-guess every gesture, torture myself with what-ifs. What if I had stepped back more? What if I hadn't called so often? What if I'd just kept my opinions to myself? The accusation wasn't a gradual dawning. It was a sudden, brutal explosion. It happened during Emily's 30th birthday dinner, a tense affair where the air already crackled with unspoken disagreements between them. I had, perhaps unwisely, commented on Jake seeming distracted lately, suggesting he needed to appreciate Emily more. That was the spark. Jake's face flushed crimson. "Appreciate her?" He'd shot back, his voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "Maybe I could if you weren't constantly in our business, Mom, telling me how to live my life, what I'm doing wrong, undermining me with Emily." I recoiled, stunned into silence. Emily looked mortified, pleading with her eyes for him to stop. But he was on a roll, years of perceived slights pouring out in a torrent of blame. "You never respected our space. Always calling, always dropping by, always having an opinion. You suffocated us. This whole mess, this failing marriage, It's because of you! He threw his napkin on the table and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me, Emily, and a stunned silence in his wake. That night was the beginning of the end. Their separation followed swiftly, the divorce finalized within months. And Jake? Jake cut me off completely. My calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread, marked only by that cold, impersonal, delivered notification. When I tried visiting his new apartment, hoping to talk, to understand, he wouldn't open the door. Then came the final, modern twist of the knife. Vague but pointed posts on his social media, visible to friends and family, about toxic family patterns and the importance of cutting ties with controlling people. The shame was a physical weight, crushing my chest. People I'd known for years, neighbors, fellow church members, started looking at me differently, their polite greetings laced with curiosity or pity. Whispers followed me down grocery store aisles. How do you explain that your own son blames you for his divorce? How do you defend yourself against accusations that feel both devastatingly unfair and yet terrifyingly, possibly true? So now I stand before this mirror, trapped in a cycle of grief and self-recrimination. I lost my son. I lost the daughter-in-law I had grown to love. My dream of a close, happy family lay in ruins, and according to Jake, I was the one holding the hammer. Most days, the weight of his blame feels absolute, crushing. I feel like a failure as a mother, as a person. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the tears finally stop, a tiny, persistent question flickers in the darkness. Was it truly all my fault? Was my well-intentioned, perhaps sometimes clumsy, involvement enough to destroy a marriage? It felt too simple, too neat a package for such devastating wreckage. Or was there something else? Something hidden beneath the surface of Jake's anger? Something I wasn't seeing? The weeks following that disastrous birthday dinner bled into months, each day heavier than the last. The initial shock and raw grief slowly hardened into a pervasive, soul-crushing depression. My home, once a place of comfort and bustling family activity, became a silent tomb echoing with my failures. Getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. Simple tasks, grocery shopping, paying bills, even watering the plants, required monumental effort. Food lost its taste. Colors seemed muted. The world outside my windows felt distant, unreal, like a movie playing that I had no part in. My own reflection continued to be a stranger, her eyes hollow, her shoulders perpetually slumped under an invisible weight. My mind became a relentless courtroom where I was both prosecutor and defendant, endlessly replaying scenes from the past, searching for evidence to support Jake's accusations. I'd spend hours sifting through old photo albums, my fingers tracing the smiling faces of Jake and Emily, searching for hints of tension beneath the surface happiness. Was I standing too close to them in that holiday photo? Did the advice I offered when they bought the house sound more like criticism than help? I pulled out boxes of old birthday cards and letters, scrutinizing my own handwriting, looking for phrases that could be misconstrued as controlling or judgmental. I even listened back to old voicemails saved on my phone, straining to hear nuances in my tone, wondering if my cheerful check-ins sounded more like interrogations. The more I searched, the more confused I became. Yes, I was involved. Yes, I offered opinions. Yes, I probably called more often than some mothers might. But was it truly malicious? Was it intentionally undermining? Or was it just love, expressed imperfectly, perhaps sometimes clumsily? The lines blurred. Jake's angry words had planted seeds of doubt that grew like insidious weeds, choking my confidence, making me question my own intentions, my own memories. Had I really been that blind? That overbearing? Had I driven Emily away? Had I, in my desire to help, actually paved the road to their divorce? The uncertainty was agonizing, a constant hum of self-reproach beneath the surface of my grief. Adding to my private misery was the public humiliation. Living in the same town for over 30 years meant my life was interwoven with the community. People knew me. They knew Jake. They had watched him grow up. They had attended his wedding shower, cooed over puppy pictures of Cooper. Now, encounters with friends and neighbors became sources of acute anxiety. The tentative questions, wrapped in feigned casualness. "How's Jake doing, Diane? Haven't seen him around lately." Or, worse, the sympathetic but probing looks. "Heard about Jake and Emily? Such a shame. Are you holding up okay?" Each inquiry felt like a fresh stab, reminding me of Jake's accusations and my perceived role in the breakup. What could I say? My son blames me for his divorce? He says I'm a controlling monster and refuses to speak to me? The truth felt too raw, too shameful to utter. So I mumbled vague non-answers, claimed everyone was adjusting, and quickly changed the subject or hurried away, my cheeks burning. I started avoiding familiar places, my favorite grocery store, the library book club. Even Sunday service felt fraught with potential awkwardness. My world shrank, confining me further within the four walls of my house and the echoing chambers of my own guilt. The isolation was profound, a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to shrug off. Time, which is supposed to heal all wounds, seemed only to deepen mine. Summer faded into autumn, the vibrant leaves mocking my gray existence. Winter arrived, blanketing the world in a silence that mirrored the one between my son and me. Holidays came and went. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Painful milestones marked by Jake's conspicuous absence. I spent them mostly alone, the ghosts of happier family gatherings haunting the empty rooms. Friends invited me over, bless their hearts, but the forced cheerfulness felt unbearable. Their pitying glances like sandpaper on my raw nerves. It was easier to decline, to retreat into the numb solitude that had become my unwelcome companion. My attempts to breach the wall of silence were consistently rebuffed. I sent carefully worded birthday cards. No advice, no questions, just simple expressions of love that went unacknowledged. I left hesitant voicemails, just saying I was thinking of him, hoping he was okay. Messages swallowed by the digital void. I even considered reaching out to Emily, just to see if she knew how he was doing, but the thought felt like a betrayal somehow. Jake had drawn the battle lines, and Emily was firmly on the other side, whether by choice or circumstance. Contacting her felt like violating the painful terms Jake had set, potentially making things even worse, if that were possible. The silence wasn't just passive, it felt active. Aggressive. Occasionally, a well-meaning friend would mention seeing Jake around town or relay a piece of third-hand news. He'd changed jobs, he was seen out with friends, small fragments that only highlighted my exclusion from his life. Each snippet was a fresh reminder that his world continued to turn without me, that he was functioning, perhaps even thriving, after surgically removing me from his orbit. It reinforced the narrative he'd spun. I was the problem, and his life was better now that the problem was gone. The self-doubt festered. Maybe he was happier without me. Maybe my presence had been a burden, a constant source of friction he was finally free from. Then came the anniversary. 1 full year since that awful night at the restaurant. 1 year since I'd heard my son's voice, barring that one slammed door refusal. 1 year of silence, of exile, of relentless self-questioning. The date loomed large on the calendar, a stark reminder of how profoundly my life had fractured. I woke that morning with a familiar knot of dread in my stomach. The house felt colder, emptier than ever. I wandered aimlessly, touching objects, A framed photo of a younger, smiling Jake, a clay handprint he made in kindergarten, a worn baseball glove tucked away in the closet. Each object was a testament to the love I had poured into him, a love that now felt rejected, invalidated. Was it all for nothing? Had I spent decades nurturing a bond only to have it shatter so completely, blamed for its demise? The weight of that year, the isolation, the unanswered questions, the gnawing guilt, felt overwhelming. I sank onto the sofa, the photo album open on my lap again, tears blurring the images of happier times. Was this my life now, defined by my son's rejection? Would I ever understand what truly went wrong? Would we ever speak again? The helplessness was a suffocating blanket. It's a terrible feeling, isn't it? To be blamed, criticized, cut off by the very people you love most, left wondering what you did wrong, if you can ever make it right. If you've ever found yourself in that painful position, wrestling with guilt and unanswered questions after a family rift, perhaps you could share a little bit about your experience in the comments. Knowing others have walked this difficult path can be a small comfort. And please, if you're finding any resonance in my story, do click that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps me feel less alone on this journey. Sitting there, surrounded by memories and unanswered questions, the despair felt absolute. How could I possibly mend this? How could I reach Jake when he had fortified himself against me so completely? Even if I accepted some blame, even if I acknowledged my mistakes, how could I apologize to someone who wouldn't listen? How could I help my son, if indeed he needed help beyond just getting rid of his meddling mother, when I was banished to the outer darkness? Was there anything at all I could do from this distance to salvage the situation? Or was the chasm between us simply too wide, too deep to ever bridge? The question hung in the oppressive silence, unanswered, seemingly unanswerable. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, listlessly stirring a cup of tea I didn't particularly want, staring out at the rain-streaked garden. Another day stretching ahead, empty and silent. Then the phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize immediately, but something about the area code sparked a flicker of familiarity. Hesitantly, I answered. "Hello? Diane, it's Emily." My breath caught in my throat. Emily, Jake's ex-wife. The daughter-in-law I hadn't spoken to in over a year, not since that awful night. My mind raced. Why was she calling? Was something wrong? Was it about Jake? My heart hammered against my ribs. "Emily," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. It's good to hear from you. Is everything all right?" There was a pause on the other end, filled with what sounded like a shaky inhale. "Not exactly, Diane. Look, I know things are strained between you and Jake, and maybe I shouldn't be calling you. Maybe this isn't my place, but there's something you need to know. Something I probably should have told you a long time ago." The urgency in her voice, combined with the unexpected contact, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. The vague anxieties of the past year sharpened into a focused point of dread. "What is it, Emily? Is Jake okay? Physically?" "Yes, I think so, as far as I know," she said, her voice dropping lower, laced with a weariness that went beyond the divorce. "But Diane, the reason our marriage failed, the reason Jake pushed you away, it wasn't really about you." I gripped the phone tighter, knuckles turning white. What do you mean?" Emily took another deep breath. "Jake, he has a problem, a serious problem, with gambling." "Gambling?" The word hung in the air, completely alien. Jake? My responsible, hardworking son? It didn't make sense. He'd always been so careful with money, almost frugal. Robert and I had taught him the value of $1 from a young age. Gambling? I echoed, confusion clouding my thoughts. Are you sure, Emily? Jake? Yes, Diane, very sure. Emily's voice was firm now, tinged with the exhaustion of someone who had carried a heavy secret for too long. It started small, online sports betting mostly, a few years ago. He kept it hidden. But it escalated quickly, especially in the last year before we split. He started losing more than he could afford, borrowing money, maxing out credit cards. Things got bad. Really bad. My mind struggled to process this. Images flashed. Jake seeming distracted, his unexplained irritability, the vague mentions of financial stress I'd attributed to work pressure or saving for the house. Had those been signs? Clues I'd misinterpreted or completely missed? Emily continued, her voice thick with remembered pain. He became secretive, defensive. We fought constantly, mostly about money, though I didn't understand the full extent of it then. He'd have these mood swings, euphoric when he won, deep depressions when he lost. When the debts piled up, when things started falling apart, he needed someone to blame, someone other than himself. A cold dread washed over me as her next words landed. He blamed you, Diane, because it was easier. Easier than admitting he had a disease, an addiction that was destroying everything. He used your involvement, your concern, as a smokescreen. He convinced himself, and tried to convince me, that you were the reason our marriage was failing, that you were the source of all the stress. It deflected attention from the real issue, the thousands upon thousands of dollars he owed, the lies he was telling. The kitchen seemed to tilt. I sank back into my chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear. Gambling, debt, lies, blaming me. It was like a key turning in a lock, shedding a harsh, unwelcome light on the past year. The accusations, the anger, the cutting ties. It wasn't about my casseroles or my phone calls or my opinions on paint colors. It was a desperate deflection, a shield against a truth too shameful to face. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture far uglier, far more tragic than the one I had been torturing myself with. The silence stretched between us on the phone line, filled only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant drumming of rain against the window. My mind reeled, trying to absorb the shock, the sheer magnitude of Emily's revelation. Gambling, serious debt, blaming me as a cover. It wasn't just a crack in the foundation of my understanding. It was an earthquake, leveling the entire structure of guilt and self-reproach I had painstakingly built over the past year. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. There was a surge of vindication, sharp and undeniable. It wasn't all my fault, quickly followed by a pang of shame for even feeling that way. Then came anger, hot and fierce, not just at Jake for his deception and cruelty in blaming me, but also, confusingly, at Emily for not telling me sooner, for letting me twist in the wind of self-doubt for so long. But beneath it all, overriding everything, was a deep, aching sorrow for my son, my Jake, lost in the grips of an addiction, hiding behind anger, pushing away the people who loved him, drowning in secrets and debt. The image of him, not as the angry accuser, but as a desperate man trapped in a destructive cycle, broke my heart anew. Diane, are you still there? Emily's voice pulled me back from the whirlpool of thoughts. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. Yes, I'm here. Emily, I don't know what to say. Thank you for telling me. It must have been incredibly difficult for you. It was. she admitted quietly. Living with it was hell, and honestly, I felt guilty keeping it from you, especially seeing how much his blaming you hurt. But I was also scared. Scared of his reaction. Scared of making things worse. After the divorce, I just needed to get away. To heal. I understand, I said, and I truly did. I couldn't imagine the pressure she must have been under, caught between her husband's addiction and his lies. Why are you telling me now, Emily? I asked softly. A mutual friend mentioned seeing you recently, she explained. Said you looked lost, and I heard through the grapevine that Jake, well, things haven't gotten better for him. He lost his job a few months ago. I suspect the gambling debts finally caught up with him. I'm worried, Diane. Worried he's going to hit rock bottom, or worse. A fresh wave of fear washed over me. Lost his job. Debts catching up. Rock bottom. My son was truly in trouble. Far deeper trouble than I had ever imagined. The need to protect him, the fierce maternal instinct that had been suppressed by hurt and confusion, surged back with undeniable force. My earlier feelings of helplessness began to recede, replaced by a dawning sense of purpose. The situation was dire, yes, but it wasn't inexplicable anymore. The enemy wasn't my perceived meddling. It was an insidious addiction. And addiction, while terrifying, was something that could potentially be understood, addressed, treated. It shifted the dynamic entirely. This wasn't about assigning blame or seeking apologies anymore. This was about intervention. This was about saving my son. What can we do? The question escaped me before I even consciously formed it. It wasn't directed just at Emily. It was a question for myself, for the universe. Emily seemed taken aback by the we. I don't know, Diane. I'm his ex-wife. I don't really have any standing anymore, and he blames me too for leaving. But you know the truth, Emily, and you care about him. I can hear it in your voice, I insisted, a new resolve hardening within me. Maybe together. The thought was tentative, fragile. Could we? Two women ostensibly on opposite sides of his life, both hurt by him in different ways, united by a shared concern? It seemed unlikely, yet oddly compelling. I need to think, Emily, I said finally. This is a lot to take in, but thank you, truly, for having the courage to tell me. After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long time, Emily's words echoing in the quiet room. The rain had stopped. A sliver of weak afternoon sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My world had been irrevocably altered. The narrative of the past year, the story I had told myself about my failures as a mother, had crumbled. In its place stood a starker, more frightening reality, but one that, paradoxically, offered a glimmer of hope. Hope that Jake's anger wasn't truly aimed at me. Hope that his problems stemmed from a treatable illness. Hope that it wasn't too late. The self-pity that had been my constant companion began to evaporate, replaced by a steely determination. I couldn't sit passively by anymore, drowning in guilt. I had to act. But how? How do you reach someone who has built walls so high? How do you offer help to someone who insists they don't need it, especially when they've painted you as the villain? The path forward was unclear, fraught with potential pitfalls. Approaching Jake directly could backfire spectacularly, pushing him further away. Yet, doing nothing felt impossible now. I couldn't just sit here and watch him self-destruct from afar. I needed a plan. I needed information. I needed to understand the beast we were facing. And perhaps, just perhaps, I needed an ally. My next step wasn't clear yet, but the paralysis was broken. I had to do something. But how could I approach him without making everything even worse? After the call with Emily, the house felt charged with a nervous energy. My grief and self-pity had been replaced by a potent cocktail of fear, determination, and a fierce, protective love. Knowing the truth, or at least Emily's version of it, which resonated with a chilling certainty, changed everything. I spent the next few days glued to my computer, researching gambling addiction. I read about the signs, the progression, the psychological underpinnings, the devastating financial and emotional consequences. I learned about compulsive behaviors, denial, the cycle of chasing losses. The more I read, the more pieces of Jake's behavior over the past few years clicked into place. The secrecy around finances, the mood swings I'd attributed to stress, the defensiveness, even the blaming. It was a textbook case, hidden in plain sight, obscured by my own assumptions and his deliberate misdirection. Knowledge, however, didn't automatically provide a clear path forward. How to approach him? A direct confrontation about gambling seemed likely to trigger his defenses, potentially severing our already fragile connection permanently. Ignoring it felt impossible. I considered involving other family members, but we were a small family, and burdening others felt premature. I thought about calling Emily back, asking her to join me, but that seemed fraught with complications, potentially making Jake feel cornered or ganged up on. No. This had to be me. Mother to son, armed with a fragile understanding of addiction and a heart full of trepidation, I decided I had to see him. Not to accuse, not to demand apologies, but simply to see him, to gauge the situation myself, and to let him know, somehow, that I was still there, that the door wasn't completely closed, regardless of what he'd done or said. I needed to try. Driving to the unfamiliar address of the apartment complex he'd moved into after the separation, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. My stomach churned with anxiety. What would I find? Would he slam the door in my face again? Would he unleash another torrent of blame? Or would I find the broken man Emily described? Each possibility felt terrifying in its own way. I parked the car, but sat for a long moment, gathering my courage, whispering a silent prayer. I wasn't here to fix him. I knew I couldn't do that. I was just here to show up. Walking down the anonymous hallway of the apartment building, my footsteps echoed unnervingly. I found his door, number 3B, paint peeling slightly around the frame. I took a deep breath and knocked, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. I heard a faint shuffling sound from within, then footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, secured by a chain lock. One bloodshot eye peered out at me. "Mom!" Jake's voice was rough, thick with sleep or something else. He looked terrible. Worse than I could have imagined. His face was pale and gaunt, shadowed by stubble. His hair was unkempt, sticking up at odd angles. He seemed shocked to see me, his eye widening slightly before narrowing with suspicion. "Jake," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm, neutral. Can I come in for a minute, please?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering past me down the hallway, as if expecting someone else. Then, with a sigh that sounded like utter exhaustion, he slowly unlatched the chain and opened the door wider, stepping back without a word. The state of the apartment hit me like a physical blow. It was dark, the blinds drawn tight against the afternoon light. Empty pizza boxes and takeout containers littered the small living room table. Clothes were strewn over furniture. An overflowing ashtray sat beside a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey on the floor next to the sofa. The air was stale, thick with the smell of cigarettes and neglect. It wasn't just messy, it felt despairing. A place where hope had packed its bags and left. Jake didn't offer me a seat. He just stood there, arms crossed defensively, watching me take in the scene. The silence stretched, thick and awkward. All my carefully rehearsed opening lines evaporated. Seeing him like this, seeing the evidence of his struggle so starkly laid bare, shattered my composure. This wasn't just gambling. This was a man unraveling. My carefully constructed wall of neutrality crumbled in the face of his obvious distress and the oppressive atmosphere of the apartment. Tears pricked my eyes, not tears of self-pity this time, but of overwhelming sorrow for him. "Oh, Jake," I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. "What's happened?" He flinched at the pity in my voice, his defensive posture hardening. "What do you care?" he muttered, turning away from me, shuffling towards the kitchen area, which was equally grim. "Thought you'd be happy. I'm out of your hair now, right? No marriage for you to meddle in." The old accusation, thrown like a dart. But this time, it didn't sting with the same paralyzing force. Knowing what I now knew, it sounded less like a conviction and more like a practiced defense mechanism, a shield he automatically raised. I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was here. Not to relitigate the past, not to defend myself, but to try and reach the hurting man behind the angry facade. "That's not why I'm here, Jake," I said softly, stepping further into the room, careful not to appear intrusive. I heard you lost your job a while back. I was worried about you." I deliberately didn't mention Emily as the source. He stiffened, busying himself by rinsing a dirty coffee mug in the sink, his back still to me. "Yeah, well, downsizing happens." His tone was clipped, dismissive. "And things look tough." I continued gently, gesturing vaguely at the room, not with judgment, but with concern. Are you managing okay?" He slammed the mug down in the sink, whirling around to face me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and shame. "Managing? What's it to you, Mom? Are you here to judge me? To tell me everything I'm doing wrong, just like always? To say I told you so about the divorce, about everything?" "No, Jake," I said firmly, meeting his gaze, holding my ground despite the tremor in my hands. "No, I told you so, ever. I'm here because I'm your mother, and I love you. And I can see you're hurting, deeply hurting. Forget the divorce, forget what was said back then. Just tell me, are you okay right now?" My directness, my refusal to engage with the old argument, seemed to throw him off balance. The anger flickered, replaced by a raw vulnerability that was almost painful to witness. He looked away, running a shaky hand through his greasy hair. "I'm fine," he mumbled, but the words lacked any conviction. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I took a tentative step closer. "Jake, sweetheart." I used the old endearment without thinking. "It's okay to not be fine. It's okay to struggle. Everyone struggles sometimes. Everyone makes mistakes." I paused, choosing my next words carefully, venturing onto thin ice. Sometimes things can get out of control. Debts pile up, pressures mount. It can feel overwhelming, like you're drowning. There are people who can help with that, you know. Professionals, support groups, people who understand. I avoided the word gambling, hoping the broader message might penetrate his defenses. His head snapped up, his eyes flashing with renewed defensiveness, mixed with panic. "What are you talking about? What things? I don't need any help. I can handle my own problems. You don't know anything." The denial was fierce, absolute. The shame was palpable. He felt exposed, cornered. I held up my hands gently. "Okay, Jake. Okay." I didn't mean to push. Disappointment warred with empathy within me. He wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be, but I had to leave the door open. Just know this, I said, my voice thick with emotion. No matter what's happened, no matter what mistakes you think you've made, I love you, unconditionally. And if you ever feel like talking, or if you ever decide you do want help, I'm here. No judgment, no lectures, just here. I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Confusion? Relief? Fleeting hope? Before the shutters slammed down again. He turned away, mumbling, "You should probably go." My heart ached, but I knew pushing further would be futile, potentially disastrous. I had shown up. I had seen the truth, harsher than I'd imagined, and I had offered love unconditionally. It was all I could do for now. "All right, Jake," I said softly. I hesitated, wanting desperately to hug him, to somehow infuse him with strength, but sensing his rigid posture, I refrained. I walked slowly to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I looked back at him, his slumped shoulders, his averted gaze. My heart felt like it was breaking all over again, but this time, for a different reason. I didn't want to say, "I told you so," about the foolishness of blaming me. But oh, how desperately I wanted him to know that the love he had rejected was still here, waiting, whenever he was ready. I just hoped he'd be ready before it was too late. I stepped out, closing the door quietly behind me, leaving him alone in the wreckage of his life. The weeks following my visit to Jake's apartment were agonizingly quiet. I had half expected, half hoped for some kind of follow-up, a crack in his defenses, perhaps even an angry outburst that would at least constitute contact. But there was nothing. Just silence. The despair I'd briefly escaped threatened to creep back in. Had I made things worse? Had my visit simply reinforced his determination to keep me out? I replayed our conversation endlessly, questioning every word, every nuance. Had I been too soft? Too confrontational? Maybe Emily had been wrong. Maybe Jake's problems ran deeper, or were different than a gambling addiction. Maybe he truly just didn't want me in his life. Just as I was starting to resign myself to this painful possibility, bracing for continued silence, the phone rang late one evening. It was an unknown number this time, not Emily's, not Jake's usual cell. My heart leaped into my throat as I answered hesitantly. "Mom?" The voice was barely a whisper, rough and choked with emotion. It was Jake. "Jake! Oh my God, Jake! Are you all right? Where are you?" Relief and fear warred within me. "Mom, I messed up. Real bad this time." His voice broke. There were sounds in the background, muffled announcements, the low hum of fluorescent lights. It sounded like a hospital waiting room. "Where are you, honey? Tell me where you are!" Panic seized me. He told me the name of the hospital downtown. He'd had a panic attack, he explained haltingly. Thought he was having a heart attack. Crushing chest pain, couldn't breathe. He'd called 911 himself. The doctors had checked him out. Physically, he was okay. But the panic, the sheer terror, had shaken him to his core. Sitting alone in the stark waiting room after being discharged, the weight of his situation, the debts, the lies, the isolation, the near constant anxiety he'd been masking, had finally become too much to bear. He had hit his rock bottom, not in a dramatic external collapse, but in a quiet internal implosion. "Mom," he whispered, his voice raw with shame and desperation. I think I need help. Like you said, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." Tears streamed down my face, tears of profound relief mingled with aching sorrow for the pain he'd endured to reach this point. The dam of denial had finally broken. "Oh, Jake!" I choked out. Okay, sweetheart. Okay, I'm on my way. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right there. Driving to the hospital, I felt a fragile hope bloom in my chest, pushing back the despair that had taken root over the past year. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't vindication. It was the trembling hope of a second chance. Not necessarily a second chance for our old relationship, but a second chance for him. A chance to heal, to rebuild, to find his way out of the darkness that had consumed him. When I found him huddled on a plastic chair in the waiting area, looking small and utterly broken, my heart went out to him completely. All the anger, all the hurt from his past accusations vanished. This was my son, stripped bare of his defenses, finally admitting his vulnerability. I sat beside him, put my arm around his trembling shoulders, and just held him as he quietly wept, the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting the tracks of his tears. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic apologies in that moment, just the quiet acknowledgement of need and the silent promise of support. He admitted, in fragmented sentences, the extent of the gambling, the depth of the debts, even worse than Emily had suspected, the constant fear of discovery, the shame that had driven him to lash out, to blame everyone but himself. He confessed that my visit, my unconditional offer of love despite the state he was in, had stayed with him, a tiny crack in his denial that the panic attack had finally shattered. I don't know where to even start, Mom, he whispered, looking utterly lost. We'll figure it out, I said softly but firmly, squeezing his shoulder. Together, one step at a time. The important thing is, you're ready to start. That night marked the beginning of a long, arduous journey. It wasn't a magic fix. Accepting help was just the first terrifying step. But it was a step taken. The hope was fragile, the path ahead uncertain. But for the first time in over a year, it felt like we were facing the same direction, even if we were still miles apart. The true work, the hard work of recovery and rebuilding, was just beginning. The journey from that hospital waiting room was far from easy. Jake, fragile but resolute, agreed to inpatient treatment at a facility specializing in gambling addiction. It was a grueling 30 days for him, confronting the depth of his denial, unpacking the psychological triggers, and beginning the hard work of developing coping mechanisms. For me, it was 30 days of anxious hope, attending family sessions offered by the center, learning about the nature of addiction myself, and understanding my own unintentional enabling behaviors from the past. The times I'd bailed him out of small financial jams without asking too many questions, attributing them to youthful irresponsibility rather than a burgeoning problem. During this time, I reached out to Emily again. We met for coffee, the initial awkwardness quickly dissolving in the face of our shared purpose. There were no recriminations, no lingering bitterness about her silence. We were two women profoundly affected by the same storm, now looking at the wreckage and figuring out how to help clean up. We talked about Jake's treatment, shared our worries and hopes. It was Emily, with her practical mindset, who researched outpatient programs and Gamblers Anonymous meetings for when he got out. We formed an unlikely alliance, communicating regularly, coordinating our support so Jake wouldn't feel overwhelmed or pulled in different directions. It wasn't about rekindling their marriage. That ship had sailed, irrevocably damaged by the addiction and the lies. It was about creating a united front focused solely on Jake's recovery and well-being. When Jake came out of treatment, the change was noticeable. He was still fragile, yes, and the road ahead was long, but the frantic energy, the defensiveness, the haunted look in his eyes, those were gone. He was quieter, more thoughtful, and carried a humility I hadn't seen in him since he was a boy. He moved back home with me temporarily, needing the stability and support. He started attending GA meetings daily, found a sponsor, and began the painstaking process of addressing his enormous debts. working with a credit counselor to create a repayment plan that would take years, possibly decades, to complete. He found a part-time job doing manual labor, swallowing his pride, focusing on the simple act of earning an honest dollar. Slowly, tentatively, he started making amends. He apologized to me, truly apologized, not just for blaming me, but for the years of secrecy, the worry he'd caused, the ways he'd taken my love for granted. It was a raw, honest conversation that left us both in tears, but they were healing tears, washing away the residue of bitterness and misunderstanding. Our relationship began to mend, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty rather than assumptions. Apologizing to Emily was harder for him, the weight of his betrayal heavier. Encouraged by both his sponsor and me, he eventually asked if she'd be willing to meet. They met at a neutral coffee shop. Emily told me later it wasn't about forgiveness in the romantic sense, but about acknowledging the immense pain he had caused her, and him taking responsibility without excuses. It was a crucial step in his recovery, and for Emily, a necessary step in her own healing, allowing her to fully close that painful chapter. Life found a new, unexpected rhythm. Sometimes the three of us would have a quiet dinner together at my house. It wasn't traditional, perhaps, but it worked for us. Emily became a supportive friend to Jake in his recovery, someone who understood the specific battle he was fighting, while I provided the steady maternal presence. We were an unconventional team, forged in crisis, bound by a shared desire to see Jake heal and build a better future. Our alliance, born from Emily's courageous phone call, became a testament to the unexpected ways support can manifest. Today, Jake is still in recovery. It's an ongoing process, one day at a time. He's working full-time now, diligently paying down his debts, actively participating in GA. He has his own small apartment again. Our relationship is closer, more honest than it has been in years. He and Emily maintain a respectful, supportive friendship. Sometimes I look in the mirror now, and I see the lines etched by worry and time. But the haunted, weeping woman from that awful period is gone. In her place is someone who navigated profound pain, discovered unexpected truths, and found strength not only within herself, but in an alliance she never could have predicted. The journey taught me that blame is often a complex shield, hiding deeper wounds. It taught me that forgiveness isn't always about forgetting, but about understanding. And it taught me that family isn't always defined by traditional structures, but by the willingness to show up, to support, and to love, even when it's complicated, even when it hurts. The path to healing was winding, painful, and utterly unexpected, but in finding the truth, we found not just answers, but a way back to each other, changed, but stronger. Thank you for joining me today and listening to my story. It takes courage to face difficult truths, whether in our own lives or in the stories of others. If you've ever experienced the complexities of family conflict, addiction, or the long road to forgiveness and rebuilding trust, I invite you to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the very thing someone else needs to hear today. Please give this video a like if it resonated with you, and be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss future stories about the intricate dramas and quiet triumphs of real life. Thank you again for your time and support. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.